Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Stacy Gilbert, a partner and the co-practice leader of the restaurant and hospitality practice at Citrin Cooperman. I would like to welcome Andrew Rigie, the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Andrew, along with his team at the Alliance, has been tirelessly working to help one of the hardest hit industries during this pandemic, the restaurant industry. And so today we will hear him talk about the trials and tribulations of what the industry has and continues to face. Andrew was born into the hospitality business, working at his family's third generation bakery in Queens, and later went on to join the New York State Restaurant Association and then on to the New York City Hospitality Alliance. So I guess it's in your blood, Andrew, huh?
It is in my blood, in the DNA.
Well, welcome, and thank you for spending some time with us. I know how busy you are, so let's get started. You've seen some dramatic consequences of the pandemic, particularly in the restaurant and hospitality industry, and particularly in New York City. So out of all of the challenges, what do you think the biggest one has been, both initially and even now?
Thanks, Stacy. Well, first, thank you to you and the team at Citrin. You've just been incredible supporters and a resource for us at the Alliance, really since day one, and especially since back in March when we initially got shut down. It's a good question, and it's a tough question. I mean, I think it's just the impact of the shock to the system. You know, we've faced all different types of crises in the past. I mean, I remember when we first launched the Alliance, right, you know, later that month, Hurricane Sandy hit. And if you go back, you had 9/11, we had the financial crash, but nothing hit us so hard and just shut us down. And here we are nearly a year later, effectively still shut down or severely limited in our operations. So I think that's the obvious. I think the challenge among so many of them has been the uncertainty. That it's impossible to plan when you don't know what's going to happen hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month. And the lack of a metric-based system, which is needed, we had it partially in the past, to determine, you know, when you're opening, when you're closing, when you can potentially expand occupancy. And that's what's made it even more challenging, just the uncertainty, because how do you run a business that was already so tough pre-pandemic in a world when you don't know what's happening day to day, and you don't know whether or not you should continue to exhaust your savings, your personal savings, try to find some sort of investment to just keep your doors open, because you don't know if it's going to be a month, 6 months, or a year from now when you're going to be up and operating at full capacity.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I've had many conversations just like that with business owners. You've been incredibly visible and in the spotlight with, you know I hear you on ABC News every now and then in the morning. And so you've kind of been a rock star in some way. How do you think, you and the Alliance have managed to make it into the spotlight? Why do you think that is?
Well, we always did a lot of press kind of before the pandemic hit. But when the pandemic hit, it brought our industry to the forefront. I mean, you'll probably hear me say it multiple times on this call, but I do not think New York City will recover unless our city's restaurant industry and nightlife industry is at the core of that recovery. And I think that's generally recognized by New Yorkers and government officials and the press, that New York doesn't come back unless our restaurants come back. We're in somewhat a barometer of what's happening on this city's streetscape. And I think because of that, because of our vital economic footprint, but also vital role in the cultural and social economy of the city, everyone's paying attention. And I think when people have been stuck in their homes, they've had to be socially distant. There's nothing more that they want than being able to go out to a great restaurant, have a great meal, go out to a bar and have a drink. So I think even if you're not in the restaurant industry directly, you may sell a product or service to the industry so you're connected. Or at a minimum, you go out to restaurants and bars so you feel connected and you are personally invested in the industry's recovery. Whereas some other industries are very important, but not everyone touches them. Not everyone has such a personal relationship with them. And then I think it's just about being ready to rally and have your message go, get out there. I mean, last night I was working, I got an email at 12:30 from a producer at 1010 Wins and said, on the slight chance you're up, we're going to be doing a story about restaurants reopening. Can you, record something now? So, 12:45, I was doing a radio bit. So I think it's, the restaurant industry, life industries, 24/7, nights, weekends, holidays. And my work ethic and the Alliance's work ethic is similar. And if we're going to get our message out there and we're going to fight for the industry, we need to make sure we are constantly banging the drum, because at the end of the day, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And we're making sure that we're not only squeaking, but we are, like I said, banging the drum.
Yeah, so true. So when your members call you for advice, and I know that they do, what have you been hearing, is their biggest concern? And has that concern changed over, the last year?
I just email Stacy Gilbert. I say, what's the answer?
Sometimes you do.
Yeah, I do. I'm telling you, I do. There's common themes. A lot has been about what's going on with indoor dining. Are we going to reopen? When are we going to reopen? What's the situation there? That's been a top issue. Also, the Restaurants Act. Are we going to get any additional federal funding? So it's really been the situation with opening, and are we going to get more stimulus from the federal government, when, and what are the parameters going to be? But I mean, we get so many things to do with liquor licenses or sidewalk cafes or the roadway seating. I always joke around, well, not really joking, that I'm kind of like a restaurateur therapist. So I think a lot of people are just rightfully very scared. They're angry, they're frustrated, and they often want to vent and they want to share their ideas. And I think that's where we get our best ideas from when our members reach out and share what they're experiencing. And a perfect example of that was early on in the pandemic, when everyone was so concerned about their leases and the personal liability guarantees they signed. So we had a call with our board members and some other folks about what we could do. And that's where we came up with the ideas. Let's draft a law that would suspend enforcement of personal liability guarantees and leases. Sure enough, that happened. It got passed, got signed into law, got held up in court, and then was extended. So that was something that I hear from people, coupled with the eviction moratorium at the state level, that is really, I say, artificially kept so many of these businesses open. Because if they didn't have, the protection on the personal liability guarantee or the eviction moratorium, they probably would have just either been tossed from their space, or they would have just had to get up and leave because they couldn't risk it. So, it's really those conversations and feedback that we get from people that allows us to craft policies, advocate for policies, and then engage those members in helping advocate to pass those policies.
Yeah, and isn't it great that they have a place to go to be able to voice that and communicate that, because they're living it, right? And,
Yes.
and you're going through it, but what do you do with all of that information? And isn't it great that they have you to either vent to or to solve a problem with? So that's great. How has COVID-19, changed the organization, the New York City Hospitality Alliance, from both a strategic standpoint? I'm sure you had to pivot your operations,
Yeah.
Decide how to devote your time. You've got to be spreading yourselves thin there.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone else, it was a shock to the system. Again, what's different with our work versus, people that are listening that are restaurateurs, always say, I'm here, in a room doing this meeting, but if I'm a cook, I can't chop carrots on Zoom, or if I'm a bartender, I'm not, mixing drinks on, WebEx or something like that. So we're fortunate in the sense that a lot of our work can be done virtually. We're using Zoom and all the other tools like everyone else, because the team is working remotely. I go into the office, try to a couple times of, during the week. But it's been tough because as a not-for-profit, we rely on two ways to keep ourselves going. One, membership dues. Clearly, our members have been financially devastated. We're extremely grateful for people that have been able to pay some dues, partial dues. People have made contributions. So that's really our lifeblood of getting financial support from, companies like Citrin and others that have been, very generous in all different types of ways, not just financially, but also with their time and being a brain trust, hosting seminars with us. And that was the other area, seminars and events. We're doing all of our trainings online. We're not charging. We're really just trying to help the industry. So we're not generating revenues through, sponsorships and ticket sales. We weren't able to do our big awards. So fortunately, we were able to put a little bit of money away. We weren't eligible for the first PPP. Now we're eligible for the second PPP. So it's been tough. But, we're fighters, just like the restaurant industry. We're just going to keep fighting, keep fighting. We've done a bunch of in-person press conferences, socially distant. We've done some rallies. So we have been out in the field. I mean, my family, we're constantly out eating at restaurants. So we're talking to people and trying to figure out, what's going on the ground. But it's tough, but we are fortunate that a lot of the work can be conducted, virtually.
I have seen some of those rallies, and it's wonderful to see all of the support that not only that you're giving, but that everyone is giving
Yep.
to you. It's fight the fight, and in the masses is certainly more that can be accomplished for sure. What do you think the future looks like for the New York City restaurants? I mean, obviously you don't have a crystal ball. But do you have a sense of what that might look like long term?
Yeah, I am. I'm as confident as I can be in this. I have no doubt whatsoever that the city's restaurant and nightlife industry is going to recover. I mean, someone else said it, but, New York City's obituary has been written many times, and everyone who wrote it was always very wrong. So I have no doubt restaurants, nightlife will come back. I mean, eating, drinking, socializing, it's in the DNA of cities. It's in the DNA of humans. I think more than ever, when people are actually allowed to get out and be together and socialize, there's going to be such a demand and a drive to go out and eat and drink and socialize. So that's going to come back. I also think there's going to be thousands of fully built out vacant restaurant spaces. And I'm hoping that we'll see a correction in the commercial real estate market, which will allow, creative entrepreneurs, restaurateurs, chefs to go and open some really great concepts. I don't know exactly what they're going to look like, but I think there will be an evolution. I think we'll see late 90s, early 2000s, when we really saw the growth of the restaurant group concept here in the city, of the umbrella group and different concepts, underneath that umbrella. I think that's going to be great. And I think we're going to see a lot of opportunity. What I am very concerned about, and what I think the doom and gloom is how are we going to mitigate and eliminate as much of the loss and devastation for people who were in the industry during the pandemic? And that's what I'm concerned about, is how do we save as many of these restaurants as possible so they can get to the future? How do we save as many of these jobs as possible? We don't have an exact calculation yet, but we estimate, a few thousand restaurants have permanently shuttered. We know countless more teetering on the edge of survival. Over the past year, New York City restaurants and bars lost more than 140,000 jobs. That's about 44% or so of the total jobs. And if you break out the full service restaurant sector, we're talking about 55% job loss. I mean, this is unlike anything we've seen before. I mean, this is frightening. And if you look at our workforce, I mean, this is people from all walks of life, many of whom may not have opportunities elsewhere in the workforce. And also, we know there's so many different people where maybe restaurants aren't their career, but they are, in the creative world, or they're going to school and using the industry as a way to make some money to put themselves through school or whatnot. So I'm really, really concerned about how people are losing their livelihoods. Long term, like I said, it'll come back. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a restaurant renaissance and another roaring 20s when we get out of here. But how do we save the loss? And then as we start rebuilding, how do we ensure the most fair and equitable recovery as possible, so different types of people have opportunities to get into the industry? And then there's the Churchill quote that I always cite: never let a good crisis go to waste. So how are we going to use this crisis to mobilize the momentum that we have to enact new policies that really support us? You know, pre-pandemic, when we had 100% occupancy, people were so frustrated with operating restaurants in the city. I mean, we did with you, Stacy, with the Citrin, the report, and I think full-service restaurants, you know, as a percentage of their revenue, labor costs were hitting 40% for some of these businesses. I mean, it's shocking. The real estate market, rents pushing 10% of sales, and the frustration and bureaucracy with the red tape, the fines, the complex labor laws where a minor technical violation results in huge liability. So how do we use this momentum to change longstanding issues pre-pandemic? How do we educate elected officials, build those relationships so we have advocates fighting for us in the halls of government, like we're doing our mayoral forum tomorrow afternoon, to really cultivate those relationships and educate those candidates. And, you know, make big changes like the open restaurants program, which more than 11,000 restaurants were participating in. No fees, doesn't require the architectural renderings. That is going to be made permanent. The current plan's in place for about another year, but the legislation we got passed sets a path forward to develop a fuller permanent program, which is still being worked out. But, you know, don't let a good crisis go to waste, and make sure that we get things done. And last thing I'll say is, during the crisis, what I have seen, and I've just been so impressed by, is people's ability to really step up and want to help and be engaged. And I think more than ever, they've seen that you can't just talk about it, you have to be about it. And my goal is for the Alliance to continue to be that conduit to let people be about it.
So do you think there's going to be a lot of transactions coming up, like sales transactions, restructuring? You know, I'm already starting to have conversations like that. So I know it's at least being talked about. What are your views on that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I've spoken with people, I know people out, you know, I've spoken with some brokers, I've spoken with attorneys, you know, I spoke brokers and liquor license attorneys, and folks like you know, in the accounting and financial world tend to be kind of like the early bellwether to get an idea of what's happening, because people start saying, hey, Stacy, you know, like I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that. So yeah, I mean, listen, there's people have money that are on the sidelines. So I think people that are connected, people that are very entrepreneurial minded, may see opportunities in all of this. And I think, you know, that's natural, and I think that's great. My concern, though, is, like I said before, some more of the mom and pop businesses, those that may not have the same sort of resources or bandwidth, or, I don't mean this in a negative way, but just like the savvy, you know, they're more of just, I'm in the restaurant every single day. This is my 1 or 2 restaurants. That's my livelihood. They were not really thinking big picture of building like a larger restaurant company. I'm concerned about what happens to them through all of this. But definitely hearing more and more people are looking at spaces. You know, it's New York, like we're gonna eventually come back. And the reason that we come back is because there's very smart entrepreneurial people that are thinking right now, you know, where do I want to be in 1 year, 3, 5, 10 years from now? So I definitely think, you know, that's going to happen. Some of the things that we're doing to try to change that regulatory environment are going to be very important as well. For example, we just sent out an alert the other day. People on this call probably know liquor licenses have been so backed up in New York City, you know, 4 to 7 month backlogs to get a liquor license, and people can't wait around that long. Around the rest of New York State, you can actually get a temporary license. So basically, after you go through the community board and get that approval or agreement or whatnot with the community board, around the rest of the state, they don't have community boards, but you can get a temporary permit until the state liquor authority processes and issues the original permit. You can't do that in New York City. So included in the governor's budget proposal is a bill that we've been advocating for, which would let restaurants operate on a temporary liquor license, meaning that if you found a space, you apply for a liquor license, we're hoping within like a 2-month period or so, or around there, maybe a little longer, you could be up and operating on a temporary permit, which would definitely speed up these deals because, no one's going to sign a lease if they're not going to be able to get a liquor license for 6.
Good to hear. I remember back in 2008 and 2009 that a lot of restaurants needed to rethink their concept because clearly the economy had changed quite a bit. So do you think any particular concepts will have an easier time or more difficult time bouncing back from this? We've got fine dining, we've got casual, we've got bars. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so much was moving in the fast casual direction, pre-pandemic, and from fine dining, moving it to more casual. It's hard to say exactly the type of concept, but I think 2 things are going to happen. I think one, and at different demographics, of course. One, people are going to want to go out and party. People are going to want to celebrate. They're going to want to be together. So, environments that have food, but also have a party scene where people can be close together and have loud music and performances and all these things that they really miss that they haven't been able to have. And I think that's also going to be fueled by the creative class. I mean, there's people in the creative economy that have just been, hurt so hard. I mean, if you're a musician or a comedian or, something in the creative world, that has always in many ways helped influence restaurants and nightlife. I think there's going to be this explosion of creativity to help influence what the hospitality industry looks like moving forward. And that could be loud, fun, busy bars with good food. But I also think we've been so distant and we've been speaking on Zoom that there's also going to be a huge human desire for connection and talking and conversations and talking about what you were doing for the past, I don't even know how long, a year, by that time, 2 years, a year and a half. That you're going to want to have environments that are conducive for conversation and interacting with people, whether that's part of your own party or just with other folks through communal dining. So I think the environments that provide a really fun environment to allow people to let loose and just have fun, but then those environments that also allow people to really just communicate and talk and share a great meal and great drinks are going to be helpful. And then the third part potentially is going to be based on work. And we had seen it, with all the cooperative workspaces. And now with so much uncertainty of what office work is going to look like, I think in Midtown and Lower Manhattan now, it's less than office buildings are at less than 10% occupancy. And, I'm sure eventually people are going to come back, but maybe for a while it's going to be a hybrid where people are working 3 days a week in the office, 2 days at home. People may still just ultimately end up working at home, but they don't want a WeWork situation. So maybe there's more restaurants that are kind of cafes where people can bring their laptops and they can hang out and, eat and drink and work and socialize. So I think that's a long way of saying I think it's going to be big party type atmospheres, those that are conducive for, communicating with each other. And then there's going to be some sort of work restaurant hybrid.
I look forward to all of that. Any thoughts on the Restaurant Act of 2021, which was at some point the Restaurant Act of 2020?
Well, I'm happy that there is one titled 2021. Yes. I wish there wasn't, and it was just the 2021 was enacted. But, we've been working very close with Senator Schumer, who's now the U.S. Majority Leader in the Senate, and he has been an enormous advocate for structured restaurant support. The Senate, part of this whole crazy vote-a-thon or whatever they call it, passed structured restaurant relief in the amount of $25 billion. We're still waiting to see all of the specific provisions, but essentially it's kind of modeled after the Restaurants Act. This new Restaurants Act, which is, you know, a carbon copy almost of the 2020 bill, is $120 billion. So obviously we support that too, and we'd like to see, you know, that pass. But I do think soon, I'm hoping that whatever relief is passed in what is now a $1.9 trillion stimulus package for the Biden administration will include structured support for restaurants in the form of grants to pay for rent, vendor expenses, payroll, utility, and it will not be structured like the PPP, which is, as you know, essentially, you know, a loan, which is converted to a grant only if you meet specific requirements that don't really make sense for our industry. So I think we'll see exactly how much the bill ends up providing, but most important is that we get a good structure in place that makes sense for the restaurant industry. There's a lot of good, smart people working on that right now. There is the political momentum, at least for the $25 billion that passed 90-10 in the Senate. I mean, who thought that that could possibly happen in today's, you know, political climate? So there will be something. Hopefully it'll be just as favorable as the Restaurants Act. If it's not as much money, let's at least get the structure out there. Let's get the money flowing. And if there needs to be more money, then you know what, we'll keep fighting to pump more money into the program, just like what happened with the first round of PPP. The money was exhausted and boom, they pumped more money in,
Right.
and it was much easier to do that then. So.
Yeah, I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel for that finally. Any thoughts on the 25% of capacity for indoor dining?
Well, we got it bumped up. Initially, it was supposed to open, you know, Sunday for Valentine's Day. As we say, it left many people brokenhearted. We got it pushed up to Friday, so now you can at least capture, if you choose to, that Valentine's Day weekend business. You know, the 50% has been happening at restaurants throughout the rest of New York State since back in June. And since that time, we continue to see infection rates and hospitalization rates go down for consecutive months. I mean, you're talking from June until, I guess, November, December, when they started going up, which everyone is really associating with the, you know, holiday surge or spike. Again, the contact tracing data is imperfect, but 75% of cases were coming from private indoor gatherings. Only 1.4% were coming from restaurants. And I think when you look at that coupled with them being open and rates continuing to go down, that if we continue to go with that trajectory, that, you know, hopefully we can get to 50% soon. I don't know. I hate making predictions now because everything is so uncertain, but I think we made our case very clear to the governor. Yesterday, about 19 members of the city council sent a letter to the governor urging him to increase occupancy to 50%. So I think we could hopefully get there. The other big thing that we're pushing for is to increase the curfew. It got pushed back, as everyone knows, to 10 p.m., which is just so difficult and really doesn't make sense because you're losing at least one table turn every night. So we'd like to get that pushed back to midnight. I mean, even 11 p.m., we'd much prefer midnight, would help you get that last seating in, which could certainly be helpful. So I think, you know, if we get open for a month and rates stay stable or continue to decline as they have been, there's a hope we can get to 50% pretty soon. And my goal is to get to, you know, April, because then it starts warming up and we have the outdoor dining to help offset it. More people are vaccinated. Hopefully we can increase the capacity of vaccinations. And that's going to be important. And as you know, we also got restaurant workers included in the vaccine eligibility, which was really helpful as well. And let's just say the whole vaccine issue is a massive issue, and it's all trying to get straightened out and getting more doses, and we'll just keep fighting.
So how can Citrin Cooperman and all these listeners help you, the Alliance, and the industry?
Oh, well, one, I mean, just staying engaged. If you, you know, are not on our newsletter, You can go to our website, which is the nycalliance.org, the nycalliance.org. Keep in the loop of what we're doing. We often send out surveys, like a rent survey. These things, fill them out. These things really help with our advocacy. Every so often, we ask you to participate in campaigns where you contact your elected officials. That's great. Even outside of that, if you have a relationship with your local city council member or state senator or assembly member, or you don't, reach out to them. Tell them that you're a restaurant owner, bar owner, or whatnot in their district, or tell them that you service, the industry, and how important it is that they enact policies to support us. And say you're involved with the Hospitality Alliance and urge them to continue to reach out to us so we can help moving them all in one orderly direction to get policies enacted that help our industry. Listen, I'll have to use the opportunity. Obviously, it's a difficult financial situation for everyone, but if you can make a contribution, any types of donations are so important to keep us going. And then, like I said before, there's so many different types of ways you can contribute, and some of that are ideas. So you can email us at info@the-nycalliance.org, info@the-nycalliance.org. You can imagine we're pretty inundated, but we always try to get back to people. So just send us some ideas. We definitely read everything. We file it into, our records to make sure when we're dealing with issues that we, reference these types of comments. Twitter, I say this all the time. I wish more of our industry was on Twitter. If you are, our handle is the NYC Alliance, and mine is Andrew Rigie, Andrew Rigie. Twitter is where all the politicians and the press are, and you can't believe it, or maybe you can, but in this world, it actually really helps move the needle. So we're very active there on policies and kind of giving the temperature of what's going on in the industry. So, please follow us, stay engaged, and, anything that we can do to try to help, just reach out to us. We don't exist without you, and we are committed to fighting nonstop for you. So that's the end of the day, and we won't stop doing it until we're all back, and then we'll keep fighting.
Okay, let's go to some Q&A. Please talk about what additional staffing will be required or suggested in the new normal.
Well, right now, I guess it's hard to say what the new normal is. I think now one of the challenges with staffing is, you don't know what's going to happen. Like the other day, Super Bowl, it snowed, and then you have your roadside seating that's canceled. So I think when it comes to staffing, you have to have nimble staffing. I think you need to have employees cross-trained, being able to do a lot of work. And obviously they have been burdened with a lot more work because of all the safety protocols. And I think really being for them, I think just being conscious of their safety, their comfort level, dealing with guests who may be, challenging to deal with in this environment. I think the new staffing will mean, even kicking it up a notch, being really supportive and open with them. To that extent, one of the things we're trying to get changed, and we have a bill introduced, is fixing the 80-20 rule to allow workers to work in a tip capacity and non-tip capacity during the same shift. We won't get into the weeds of all that, I'm sure most people know, but that's something that we're trying to change. Also, we're trying to get a bill introduced now that would allow tips to be shared with back of house. And I think specific to the answer is just trying to be as nimble as possible with your staffing until we get to a place where we're at 100%. I think when we get back to a place where we're at 100% occupancy, you will have to make some determinations of, are we keeping it as a traditional full service restaurant, or are we reducing it? But I really don't have any other good answers because it just, it just changes. But I think regular communication with employees is going to be important, and trying to get some of those laws changed to give you maximum flexibility in how you staff.
Here's a question that I would have asked myself. Do you have any news on the SVO grant, the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant?
Good. Yeah. So yeah, so that was something that we pushed for. So we just sent out an email earlier. If you go to our website, I think it's up on our homepage, the nycalliance.org. The city's Office of Nightlife is doing a few different webinars on preparing it. The application, I don't believe yet is live. They are still working through, the structure of rolling the program out. But I'm hoping that during these webinars, they're going to be providing you some information to get you prepared. The one thing I would suggest, because I believe it's only $15 billion and there's a lot of people that are lining up for it, will be do everything as possible, to have all your paperwork lined up. So when it opens up, you're ready to go. Anyone that you rely on, payroll companies, accountants, let them know that you're kind of just, you're waiting because you got to strike quickly.
Agree. What do you think will happen to the relationship between the delivery companies and the restaurants the day after COVID-19?
I think we need to make the third-party delivery cap permanent. We're also getting a law passed that will prohibit third parties from listing restaurants on their sites without their written permission. And then the third we're fighting for is to guarantee ownership of customer data to the restaurant if it's processed through the third party. I think those three policies, and there's some others too, but those three generally will help tip the scale a little bit and hopefully even the playing field a bit to give restaurants a bit more leverage to start using their own platforms. The big problem here is there's good technology out there that allows you to manage your own deliveries. It's just when a company like Seamless and Grubhub owns upwards of 60% of the market, and that's how customers are used to ordering, it's going to be very challenging to pull them away. So I think the sophisticated restaurant operators really should be focusing as much as possible now is how do we own that customer relationship and get people to start ordering direct. I think there's going to be more consolidation in the industry. It boggles my mind that these are billion-dollar companies that, for the most part, just continue to blow through hundreds of millions of dollars and their investors allow them. There's an interesting interview. I don't know if you know Kara Swisher. She has writes for the Times, but she interviewed, his name escapes me, but of Uber. And, Uber Eats now has become their prime driver of revenue. And I think we're going to see it with other acquisitions in the industry. So I think there's going to have to be a big push from the industry to move off these platforms, control their customer data, redirect orders to their own platforms. And I think there's also an educational component for the consumers. And I have to say, we've been hammering these third parties for a long time now. But when Uber had the commercial during the Super Bowl with Sesame Street, going to Twitter, I couldn't believe how they were getting railed on by people saying, look at this company paying, I think they said $5.5 million for this ad, yet they're trying to rip off restaurants. So I think we have to educate consumers and we really need to take control. Rip all your third-party stickers out of your restaurant windows. Don't promote anything, promote your own delivery channels. And I think we just all need to fight back and, time shall tell. But they are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to control the market. So if restaurants want to push back, they need to really take ownership and take a full court press.
One last question. There have been a number of articles by food writers writing very passionately about keeping indoor dining closed for the safety of workers and telling people they should spend their money with takeout, including strong tipping and buying gift cards. Do you have a feel for how the majority of restaurateurs feel about that?
About the article or just about having indoor dining closed?
I would imagine about, just the message that's being sent.
Yeah, well, listen, this is an impossible situation. In an ideal world, the pandemic would have hit, government would have said, we're shutting your restaurant down and we are going to compensate you for the greater good. And nearly a year later, we wouldn't be in this situation. So I always, and I get a little worked up and frustrated that when people are sitting probably at home, collecting a paycheck, probably have health insurance, are in a sense attacking the industry. And look, you can have fair different opinions, I'm not saying that, but people are aggressively going after the industry. I think it's unfortunate. I think people are in an impossible situation. They're losing their livelihoods, they're losing their businesses, people are losing their jobs. Some people are ineligible to receive any benefits if they're unemployed, if they're not working. So they need to work because they have families. And I think it's easy to say when, keep restaurants closed when you don't rely it for you and your family's livelihoods, and your life is not going to be ruined. I get the empathy. I get the situation very clearly. I mean, dealing with it every day. So I'm a little disappointed in some of their messaging. I think the reporters could present their opinion, but at least be a little bit more in the way they present the counter perspective. It's a horrible situation, and no matter what decision you make, it's going to be a bad one in that sense. You're basically picking from the worst options. But we as a city, as a state, as a nation, we need to mitigate risk. We need to deal with the situation that we've been handed. It's a crappy situation. And we know that just takeout and delivery and giving a good tip is not going to do it. It needs to be coupled with reduced occupancy indoor dining. And I think they can cite all the academics and studies and things they want, but the reality is from the available contact tracing data, restaurants have not been the major source of infections. In fact, I think in some cases it's actually counter, because people are going to socialize no matter what you tell them. And they could either go to a socially distant, reduced occupancy, highly regulated restaurant, or they can go into a completely unregulated apartment that we know have been the largest force for spread of COVID-19. You can't just say that's not going to happen. So I think we need to look at that. I think we need to look at the data that I shared before, that restaurants have been open since June and the rates continue to go down consecutively. Is there a risk? Of course. But I think it would be better if some of these writers put all this in perspective, because I'm getting concerned that it's kind of shaming the industry or trying to give a black eye to an industry that's really just trying to survive. So, and listen, people that aren't comfortable eating indoors, like, they shouldn't. No one's saying they have to. If workers are not comfortable going to work, they shouldn't. And I would hope employers are flexible. And for people say, well, that's not how it works. People get called into work. Well, then get fired. And if you get fired, then you're eligible to collect unemployment. I mean, if you're not one of those people that can collect unemployment, that's a fault of the system. That is not a fault of the restaurant industry. And I've just heard many of those people want to work because they have families. They may not want to, but they need to.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider there, but you're right. I mean, if people don't want to go out to eat, they don't have to go out to eat.
Yeah.
So I should say that there is a listener that said, thank you for this informative program and for your time, Andrew. Good luck. So obviously you've got a fan here too.
Thank you.
And I will, in the essence of time, wrap this up. I do want to thank you so much, Andrew, for all that you do on behalf of all the restaurant operators that I know have relied on you so much. And Citrin Cooperman thanks you for all that you do as well, and for partnering with us on all the initiatives where we try to help our clients and everyone in the industry. I can't thank you enough. And if there's anything that we can do to help you in the industry, I think we're here for all of you.
I know. Thank you. You've all been just absolutely terrific. Really appreciate everyone on the call. Like I said, it's an impossible position. No matter what we do, we're always going to have to do more. But that's why it's more important than ever that our industry is united as one, we're fighting forward. We're dealing with all these really complex issues, and stay in touch. That's why we have an alliance, to unite the industry, fight for the industry, and support the industry. And as I started off, I said, New York City will not come back unless New York City's restaurant nightlife industry comes back. And there is no possible way we can let New York City not come back. So we got to fight. We got to do this. And we will with all your support and participation.
Great. Well, thank you again, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Andrew.